Hello and welcome. This is Tamiya Robles. So now we're going into part three of my adoption uncovered, the search for the truth. So in part two, I was talking about very briefly me looking for my biological father's side of the family. And I'm gonna just pick up where I left off. So uh, we already know who the birth mother is. So I'm putting word on the street in Chester that I'm looking for this guy. In all actuality, because Chester is so small, word is spreading fast. Like some chick is saying that so and so is her dad. And if we know who he is, blah, blah, blah. Right. And so somehow, some way, a couple people hit me up, believe it or not. So my ex boyfriend actually knew of dude, but he didn't know enough. I think I forgot. I don't know if he pointed me in the direction, or I think he knew his son. My memory is kind of shady, hazy on that. But then this one chick hit me up, right? And she was an older chick, and she was very disrespectful. And she was like, "What do you want to know about my father? Why are you asking questions? Yada yada yada." And I'm telling her like, well, it's a strong possibility he's my biological father. No, he's not. She's going on and on, cursing at me, disrespectful, whatever. So I'm like, all right, sis, I'm already prepared for this not to go well because I was a secret. I knew I was a secret by then. So, well, you're just not going to just disrespect me. That's not going to happen. And the funny thing is with Chester, like, because Chester is such a small town and everybody knows everybody, that like if you didn't know somebody and that person's asking questions, they're going to try to figure out who you know to even ask in the first place. So if you knew me in Chester, like if you knew me, my connections were my brothers, minus the youngest one because I don't fuck with him. My niece and nephew's mom, because she came from a big family. She was known through the projects. We call the dog pound. We just call them the projects. So she was known through the projects. That's where I hung out anyway. My peoples were there, but you knew them. Or if I was like, yeah, that's my peoples, that's my brother, or my second foster mom, her boyfriend, Carl, like I love him to death to this day. I have a whole lot of respect for him, and he's only a couple years older than me. But I have a lot. I can say, yeah, him, his brother, his mom, his family, and it's like, oh, you fuck with them. Oh, okay, what's up? Let's help you. But if they can't connect the dots and say you're affiliated with this family or that family, then you're a cop. You know what I'm saying? You're sus and you're the police, right? So obviously I wasn't that, but I was kind of deemed the Philly chick. And Chester, especially back then, they didn't really care for Philly people like that unless you were cool. And it's just a small town hating over a big town thing. It has history on it, and I know where it comes from, and I understand it. But that's neither here nor there. But I was a cool Philly chick. Like I wasn't one that was like hating on Chester. I accepted Chester as part of who I was. So I was still a stranger to many, was the point. And I'm asking about this guy, and this guy who was the son of another person that was technically my biological grandfather, that was known in the streets. Both people were known in the hood, like to a certain degree. I don't want to say major, I don't know, because I don't really care, right? So this chick, the one chick came at me and she was like, "That's my father. Fuck you. You're not his kid." Yada yada. I'm like, "All right, whatever." Then this other chick hit me up. It was a girl. Her name is Kia. All right. Now if she hears this, I do not care. But Kia started off in the beginning really sweet, but she was just like, "Listen, more than likely, you're not my biological sister. I'm the youngest child that he had. You don't have any DNA. Do you have proof? How did you come about? Who was your mother?" And she was like, "Well, first of all, my father did have a lot of kids. My mom was his main one." And she stood 10 toes down like that was something to be proud of. You know, it wasn't, but I get it to a certain degree if you're raised in that mannerism. But they all got abused. they all got physically abused or put on drugs, all the baby mamas. He had a bunch of kids, but not all of them were biologically his. He was just claiming these kids. He was just claiming a whole bunch of kids. So, but there was no record of my incubator. They didn't know about her. They didn't know about another baby, another child. And if your father is a rolling stone like that, you don't ever feel comfortable saying you were the last child because clearly he's out in these streets making babies. You understand? So whatever. But she was older than me, I think about like 1 or 2 years. But she was cool. Like she answered some questions. She was supposed to send me a picture of him. She never sent it. I forgot who did send me a picture of him. But she explained to me that he had passed away and that he was on drugs. He was a junkie. He was a junkie most of his adult life. My search angel was able to find some information on my biological grandfather, which is his father, because he had served in the military and fought some war. It wasn't Vietnam. It was it World the Second World War? I don't know. Whatever was before Vietnam. And he had you can see that he signed up for the military in ancestry.com, which is pretty cool. His application to sign up for the military, it listed him as mulatto, which was wild, right? No, his mother was mulatto, or he was biracial, right? He was black and white. His mom was white. It was something crazy like that. It stood out, whatever the case was. And the reason why that became a topic of discussion because again, like I said, Kia was cool in the beginning, and we were talking about she was talking about how she has kids and how she was raised, and then she said this weird shit like I was telling her, I said it's funny that my ancestry shows a lot of Caucasian people, a lot of white people close in generations. Like this isn't like way back in slavery times. And she was like, well, actually, and she gave this crazy story about how we had our great somebody was a slave locked in the attic. They were just there to be raped and produce a whole bunch of kids by massa. And that's why I'm like, okay, I don't know what to believe. I mean, crazy. I'm telling you, slavery was some crazy times. You know what I'm saying? But did that happen per se? How do you know that? Like, how the hell do you know? So again, I realized that I'm being told a whole bunch of nut ass stories. So I'm like, I just want the truth, people. Like, what's going on? Who is this dude and whatever and whatnot? So she was just like, you know what, I enjoyed talking to you and everything. She was real ignorant. She was like, I enjoyed talking to you. It was great. You seem to be a nice person. You're not my sister. I don't care what the DNA results say. No, I'm not getting tested. I'm not confirming that you are or are not my biological sister. I don't care either way. Don't call me again. Fine. Fuck it. Right. So life goes on. And then it wasn't that long afterwards, I got a random phone call from her brother. And her brother is named Carl. Carl, because that's right. So the biological sperm donor, his actual name was Carl. I forgot what his hood name was, his street name was. So Carl was like this, nothing like Kia, right? So Carl was really sweet, really nice. We're Facebook friends to this day. I can try to see if he'll get on, if I can interview him. Again, if you ever have to adopt or foster and your child needs to connect, these are the things you're going to have to deal with and might have to hear and consider, be prepared for. I haven't spoken to him. I didn't want the family to get connected to me. He wanted to be connected to me. But anywho, he called me and he was just really amazed that this was a possibility that I was his biological half sister. He was just not a hater. He was just amazed and shocked, and he wanted to see what I looked like, and he just seemed more open minded and understanding. Before he called me, he was smart enough to talk to his mother and asked his mother if she knew of my incubator. I think the mother vaguely knew about me, but one of the things that she was stressing was that their dad was just such a whore. I mean, she wouldn't have been surprised if he was making more babies and stuff like that. So she wasn't able to really confirm or deny, but she was like, I guess so, but I'm not sure. But it seemed like his mom wasn't a hater. So I don't know why Kia was such an evil demon, especially if you hear the rest of the story. So, anyway, moving right along. So, Carl was very open to getting his DNA done. I'm very appreciative of that. And I know he found out some of the people I was cool with and who I was connected to. But I guess he wanted to wait for the DNA results to come back. So I was paying for a lot of DNA tests, y'all. I didn't tell y'all all the stories, but I must have paid for about 6 people's DNA tests while I was trying to figure out the truth about my adoption. So I took the test, came back, and it said he's my biological half brother. And so he really appreciated that. He really liked that. He wanted to meet me. He looked at it like we all need to sit down and meet each other so our kids don't intermingle. My kids are never going to. I never say never. I should never. I should continue not to say never, but I don't see it. I don't see it. I just don't see it. Mm-mm. The way I'm raising my kids, the way my kids want to grow up in a different country. You know, I'm not grow up. They want to once they turn 18 and graduate college and stuff. They want to live in Japan, okay, and Russia. Like I don't think there's going to be a slim chance that they're going to ever link up. But life be life, and sometimes you never know. But I have no real desire to meet that side of the family. It just I don't care, right? So then I got another phone call, and it was from another Carl. so so I think he has 2 sons named Carl, and this was his very first. This was the sperm donor's very first born, I do believe. And he didn't know much about his biological father because he said he was on drugs and he wasn't in the picture. And so was his mom, and his grandparents raised him. So he definitely didn't know I existed at all whatsoever. He didn't have much of a relationship with his siblings. It was like a jealousy type of thing. He didn't know anything about my incubator. Nobody knew anything about anything about anything. That's the best way I can explain it. So what I did get, I didn't have I got more facts with the biological side than I did the incubator side. So, in a nutshell, and this story is crazy because I wound up talking to cousins from the South. I think a woman named Star Moss, I think she's one of my biological cousins. We're Facebook friends. Man, it goes pretty deep. It even goes back to Islam and how both sides, my real family and my biological family, have interconnected and probably didn't know, or maybe they did know. It actually, my adoption actually turns into some sort of weird mystery that I think I figured out, but nobody wants to admit that I'm right for like secrecy reasons. Yeah, it gets crazy. But anyhow, so Carlton, we'll just say Carl 1 and then Carl 2, which is the one I did the blood test for. They didn't have a good relationship, but both of them did want to see me. They were super excited that of my existence. I was happy that they were happy. I was like, good for you guys. I'm pleased. But I just exited stage left. I don't really feel bad about it. I just didn't want any. That's not what I'm here for. So the story is that apparently my biological grandfather was from the South. I just say the South. I don't know which part of this, Georgia, South Carolina, one of them South, deep South. And he wanted to get a job or do something up north being Chester area. And his wife at the time, it was his wife and his wife's best friend. It's hopefully somebody will correct me. It's a crazy story. So the wife was like, "No, I don't want to go." But her homegirl was like, "I'll go with you." Right. So he was like, "Bet." And then so she went with him, I think. And then maybe his wife did come and was like, fuck it. So it was weird. But I think my biological grandmother is the girlfriend of the wife. Yeah, go figure. So he had kids by her, and I think I don't know. It was the child was messy. It was just mad messy, and he really mistreated the women. He was extremely abusive. One of the family members that is a biological cousin, I have talked to very briefly. He has a lot of anger and rage issues because he was raised by her, and he grew up seeing him beat the crap out of her all the time. So he never really has much to say to me, but when he did give me some insight on who he was and that my biological sperm donor was a loser, he hated him too. He hated him because my biological grandfather taught my biological father to be an asshole and to be abusive. So he just didn't have a good taste in the mouth, which is understandable. I'm not mad at that. I get it. Generational curses are a bitch, man. That's why they need to be broken. Anywho, so when they made it up to Chester, it was for like a job opportunity, so on and so forth. I do know that he was a Mason and he couldn't read. That's what I do know. I do know he's in the military. I do know he was biracial. And that's where a lot of that high yellow complexion comes from and the mixtures or whatever. And like me personally, I have two kids. One's dark skin, one's light skin, and it kind of makes sense as it's all coming together, I guess, genetically. And apparently all the kids look like that. We're just like the rainbow, right? So cool. My biological grandfather was also a pimp in Chester, PA. So he was pimping chicks, and that's how people knew him. And then my biological uh, sperm donor he was supposed to make it into pro football. He wound up doing something else, and he became a junkie, and then he just became an asshole, then he became a criminal, and then he was running from the cops. Now, from what I heard, he was on the run when he met my biological incubator and was hiding out in Philly. And that's funny because growing up, when I was younger, people in Philly would hide out in Delaware and Chester. So he was from Chester, hiding out in Philly, and that's probably how he hooked up with the incubator. Now, that's all I know. Now the girl, remember I told you there was a woman that came out and she was like, "F you, you ain't my dad's kid. I'm the daughter." Da, 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 blah blah. Come to find out, she's not biologically related to him. He was just claiming kids. He was one of those deadbeats that claims everybody else's kids but their own. Yeah, that one. That one. And be like, "Oh, this is my daughter. This is my," and they call him dad, and that's not your dad, like that situation. So, and then the guy I asked about, the light skinned kid that Fatima I told you about in the second part, Fatima was doting over. Well, that's not his kid either. He just claimed the kid as his, and to this day, the guy acknowledges him as his father, this my sperm donor as his father. So it's really crazy. And from what I understand, he never took care of his biological kids, much less somebody else's kids. It was just a name, just to say, "Oh, this is my dad, this is my son," and then not being there anyway for the real people. Boom. So now it's out in the open that this is my biological father. So I go back to my people, is like, "Yo, found out this dude is my father." They're like, "Yo, that's your dad." I didn't know. Oh my God. Blah blah blah. So now everybody knows like this is my biological father, and didn't really have a lot of nice things to say about dude because he was a junkie, you know what I'm saying? But come to find out, Carl, the second Carl, the one that took the DNA test, he was so sweet. He was trying to find out about me, so he would like go to people that he knew we had in common, and he was asking questions like, "What does she look like? Is she nice? Is she cool?" So he wound up being cool with my nieces and nephew's mother. Like I said, like I got big family down Chester, you know what I mean? And she's known down there. Love her to death. Love you, Nikki. But she was telling me like, girl, he done came around and asked questions about you. And I told him like she's very intelligent, she's beautiful, but she's crazy as shit. Like, so that's a little inside Chester thing. If you know me, you know why. We know what that's about. But anyway, but I just didn't really feel. He reached out a couple of times, so he realized I wasn't interested in linking up like that. But I wanted to rub it in Kia's face that it has been confirmed that I am her biological sister, even though she didn't want to hear about it. So I called her and she was like, "What?" I was like, "I don't know if you heard this or not. I don't want to bother you or anything, but thanks to your brother, I didn't need your DNA, need your DNA test. Carl did the DNA test, and ta-da! I'm your biological. I think in this situation, I said I was your sister because I wanted to just rub it in her face. So I was like, "I'm your sister. I'm your baby sister. Hi." And she was like, I don't believe that, but all right, I already knew. Carl told me, and like I said, I don't care. And just so you know, he ain't got no money talking about the sperm donor. He was a junkie. Like, my kids got more money than him. Get out of here. You know what I'm saying? You ain't getting no money. He ain't leave nothing anyway. I got his ashes. Don't ask for nothing because we ain't doing nothing for you. I said, girl, go to sleep. Get something to eat. Get your electrolytes up or some shit, bitch, because I don't want nothing y'all got. I don't want y'all. You know what I mean? But I was able to find out through, I forgot who told me what actually happened to Carl, meaning the biological sperm donor. Carl was a junkie and he was taking heroin, probably crack most of his adult life during that era. And his last few years, he was slowly dying of whatever heart failure, disease, whatever. But he never stayed around his family. He wound up being with another woman. They didn't have kids, to my knowledge. He just he made her some woman he settled with in Michigan, I think Detroit, Michigan. And how he died was he was cleaning himself up. He was um, bettering his life, but he went swimming and died of a heart attack in the pool. From what I understand, it just years and years of hard drugs took a toll on his body, and it was time for him to check out. So that's what he did. He checked out, to my knowledge, was not aware that I existed. I had no desire to find this woman and ask her questions because I just didn't care enough. Just simply didn't care. So that another thing I want to say about finding that side of the family and speaking with Kia is pretty important. It's really fucked up, but it's important. And it's good to know the background, if you can, of whatever child you're adopting, because they're going to have stories similar to mine, especially if they've had just a really messed up background. Not every child came from was a secret child of the rich and famous, or so. That is not always the case. In most cases, it's a poor, destitute background, such as myself, and that comes with serious situations connected to it, and mistreatments and abuse and things like that. So in my situation, one of the conversations I had with Kia before she told me never to call her again was she explained to me about her father and what type of relationship they had. And because the grandfather was a pimp, he taught his son, which was my biological sperm donor, to be a pimp as well. So she was the girl, and he would tell her or teach her to be a whore. That was his parenting. And he would call her a whore, and she accepted it. Even when her and I were talking, she was flashing back to an argument that they had. And he said something, and she was like, "Listen, I know I'm a whore. That's not the problem." And I'm like, "What? That's how you address yourself? Like, you think you're a whore? All right. All the more reason for me not to meet y'all or introduce you guys to my children. I don't need that carried on to my kids. Like, I don't need my kids to overhear you talk like it's another day about you being a whore because that's how your father raised you to be. It was just it's really sad. It was sad. Now, once I found out during the time where I did the DNA test, found out who my biological sperm donor was, I was updating Fatima. This is when me and Fatima were still cool. So I called her and she was like, "Oh, did you find out who your biological father was? Like, is he alive?" Like, she was really curious about him, and I wasn't feeling that. But I said, "Yeah," I answered her. I said, "Well, he passed away, but I found his children and I talked to the children." So she asked about the little light skinned boy that she remembered. So did you find him? Like, he had a nickname. I don't know if it was Cookie or something weird, but did you find him? Did you is he alive? I said, "Well, I'm gonna tell you something. That wasn't his child." She was like, "Well, he was like his." No, that wasn't his dad, yo. Like, he was just playing dad like dudes do, like he was raised to call him dad and he was always said that was his son. That's not his son. She was like, "Oh, he was so cute. Did you talk to him? Do you know what he looked like? How old was he when he died? Where did he die at? Did he get married?" Like, she's asking all these questions about my biological sperm donor and his family, but never asked these questions about me. Like, again, the mistreatment of the adoptee, low key, is astounding to me. Like, even me talking about my story, I know people that are connected or know of this story. I know they're gonna say some fucked up shit to me. I don't care because I'm just built that way. I don't really fuck your feelings. This is my life. This happened to me. But they tend to attack the adoptee when, again, I didn't ask to be here. I didn't ask to be here. I didn't ask to be connected to this situation. I didn't seek these people out and say, "You know what? I'm going to destroy some families today. That's what I'm going to do." I didn't do that. I happen to be the victim of these circumstances. Take it up with the people that created these circumstances. You understand? So this was the beginning of the end of our connection. It was solidified when I met her, and I'll talk about that in part 4. Okay. But I was just like, "Why do you keep asking about his family?" She was like, "Oh, I was just wondering, da 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 da." I think low key she was hoping the guy was still alive and was hoping to still get with him. Ugh. So then she said, I told her about my conversation with Kia and how Kia was just a fucking demon, is an evil little bitter child and scarred for life, I guess. I mean, just because of how she was raised. And Fatima had the nerve to say, "Oh, that's because you're better than them. You're prettier than them, and they can't take it." I was like, "What? That doesn't make any sense." Like, okay, whatever. So that's as far as my story goes with finding the biological sperm donor. Like I said, I can go on and on because it's story within a story, but that's the gist of it. This is the longer version of the adoption story. Now, I am going to tell you guys in part 4 how I actually met my biological incubator and how that whole fuck shit went. All right. In the meantime, I'll talk to you later. Have a good one.